My father was a minister. We lived in a very tiny farm town in upstate New York. No people of color. And he supported the civil rights movement at a time when in those rural white enclaves, Martin Luther King was one of the most hated men in America. He had been a sergeant in North Africa. He opposed the Vietnam War. He told me when I was about 12 or 13 that if the war was still being waged when I was 18 and I was drafted, he would go to prison with me.
He'd go with you?
He'd go. I still have this image of sitting in a jail cell with my dad for and then his youngest brother was gay, and my father was the rest of the family disowned my uncle, and of course his partner, and except for my dad. And my father had a particular sensitivity for that reason, for the pain of being a gay man in America in the 1950s and 60s, and he became very outspoken about gender equality, gay rights, which ultimately led him to run afoul of the institutional church. They asked him to stop speaking out about this issue. At the time, I was an undergraduate at Colgate. He had a church in Syracuse. Colgate's an hour away. As a matter of fact, when my dad found out that there was no gay GBLT group or gay and lesbian group at Colgate, he brought the gay speakers to my college. And I would sit around. I was probably one of the most committed heterosexuals at Colgate, but I would be sitting around. And my father kept saying, you have to stand up. You have to come out of the closet. And given the fraternity culture and the football culture and the elitism of Colgate, that's not something they wanted to do. But it was a problem my dad solved by driving down to Colgate one day, taking me out to lunch and telling me that I had to found the Gay and Lesbian Alliance, which I did. I founded it at Colgate, and I would go into the dining hall, and the checker would take my card and check off the box for breakfast and hand it back and go, faggot. And when the church told him he had to stop speaking about this issue, his response was to hold open his church on Easter for an Easter service for the GBLT community of Syracuse, New York. And he came down and got me, and he told me it's probably one of the last times I'll ever hear him preach. And I walked into that church, and that church was filled with people for whom the institutional church had caused tremendous suffering and pain. I mean, people were crying even before he started. And he said, a marriage is a sacrament. It's not a reward for being a heterosexual. And any church that refuses to honor the sacrament of marriage doesn't deserve to call itself Christian. And he was out. And the last time I saw him, he was working in a windowless basement room as a chaplain in a juvenile detention home. I was the Balkan bureau chief for the New York Times. And, you know, in terms of status and earning power, I had risen, obviously, at that moment far above my dad. But I can remember walking down that hall and realizing what a great, great figure he was. And he gave me, you know, that understanding that you're not rewarded for virtue. Virtue itself is its own reward. Doing what's right, standing up and making a moral choice has a cost. And if it doesn't have a cost, it's probably not much of a moral choice. And your own life has exemplified this, Cornell. And, you know, just to end, when I was denouncing the call, I'd been the Middle East bureau chief for the New York Times, 7 years in the Middle East, months of my life in Iraq. And when I was denouncing the call to invade Iraq, I was booed off of a commencement stage in Rockford College, and had my mic cut, and at one point most of the 1,000 people stood up and began singing God Bless America to drown me out. And my newspaper, the New York Times, issued me a formal written reprimand to stop speaking out about the war. And that's under guild rules. You give the employee the reprimand in writing, and then when they violate that reprimand again, under guild rules, they can be fired. But I realized, and it wasn't an easy moment, I'd been at the Times for 15 years, nobody wants to lose their job. Not only that, I was never, if I didn't stop speaking out, I was never going to get another job in American journalism again. But I realized as I sat in that office that I could muzzle myself and pay fealty to my career, but to do so would be to betray my father, and I couldn't do that. And when I left the paper, I quit the paper, and when I walked out the door, for the first time I articulated what it was my father, who had died in '95, what it was my father had given me, and that was freedom. That I didn't need the New York Times or anyone else to tell me who I was. I knew who I was my father's son.
Ooh. Wow. Wow. That's powerful, man.